Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm going to give people a couple minutes to for the latecomers to join up, and then we'll get started at 2 minutes past the hour. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. If you just joined, I'm giving folks 1 more minute for any latecomers that might be coming to the session. So please just sit tight. We'll get started at 2 minutes past the hour. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining today's webinar, Preparing Your Policies for a CMMC Assessment. My name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and I'm going to be the host of today's session. So just to remind everybody, in today's webinar, we'll be showing you how to use Exostar's Policy Pro application. If you'd like to follow along with us while David, my colleague here on the phone, goes through the tool, you can use the Policy Pro free trial. You'll see a link to that in the YouTube description. We've got a couple slides to introduce it, so you've got a couple minutes before we actually dive into that portion of the presentation. So if you'd like to get that started, I encourage you to go to that YouTube description, the link there, and get signed up for Policy Pro itself. Just a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to 1 hour. That includes a question and answer session. A large portion of today's event is dedicated to answering those questions. Those questions were submitted prior to the event when you signed up. So I'll be covering those at the end. In case of an outage, please wait for a minute, try and refresh the page, and that should reconnect you. For your convenience, there is a link in the YouTube description to a glossary of commonly used terms, acronyms, and initializations that will be referenced during today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand via the Exostar resource library. That can be found on our website at www.exostar.com/resources anytime after the event. You can also get there using that same YouTube link you received in your email about this webinar. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts, get a copy of the slide deck we use, feel free to reach out to us at our email address, cmmc-team@exostar.com. You can also go to any of the web pages on our website, www.exostar.com. There's an option there to start a live chat. Feel free to ask your question there, and we'll get answers to you that way as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm joined today by David Rowe of ISMS Solutions. David will be conducting the demonstration part of today's webinar. David, you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is David Rowe. I am the business developer manager here at ISMS Solutions, and glad to show the platform and how it can help your needs to getting your assessments done and your policies completed for CMMC 2.0.
Thanks, David. So before I turn it over to David, I just want to kind of level set everybody where we are in this CMMC journey, right? So at the if you're thinking about kind of just the overall view of CMMC, right? It's gone through a couple of iterations. We're currently on CMMC 2.0. There are 3 levels within that CMMC model, and CMMC stands for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And those 3 levels correspond with the various controls from the National Institute for Standards, right? Those are where you see that NIST 800-171, NIST 800-172. Those are the, if you will, the standards that the different controls align with. And then what you see on the assessment side is what you need to do to assess your organization's accomplishment or implementation of those different controls. Right. So for level 1, there are 17 practices, and you should be doing an annual self-assessment of how you're doing against those, and so on up the chain to level 3. Now, there's been a lot of discussion that I found when we came back for the new year in 2023 about CMMC rulemaking. When I last talked to most people out in 2022, the assumption was that in March of 2023, that CMMC would be issued as an interim rule, and that after a 60-day public comment period, it would be implemented and start to show up in DFARS clauses, right? And then if you need some additional information about CMMC, there's that information that you see below about the cyberab.org. That's the certification agency that's responsible for certifying people who can do the assessments, provide training, etc. But what we found, but what we've heard since then, and this is really about the timing, if you will, is that it's unclear whether or not in later this year, if CMMC is going to come out as a notice of proposed rulemaking, or it's going to come out as an interim final rule. Now, Stacy Bastianic, right? She is the person in DoD who runs the CMMC program. It is her intention to have it come out as an interim final rule. If the Office of Budget of Management and Budget, sorry, OMB, not OBM, OMB, may list it instead as a notice of proposed rulemaking. If that's the case, the timeline does move. We don't know yet when that will be, but everyone should go under the assumption that CMMC is coming. The dates aren't yet in stone, but it is coming, and so you should start to prepare accordingly. Now, what that doesn't relieve you from is that as a matter of fact, many of those same things that you need to do for CMMC are already in place today, right? If you're working under a subcontract or a direct contract with DoD, you've signed particular agreements with DFARS clauses that require you to comply with NIST 800-171. So if you've got DFARS clauses in your contracts, or those DFARS clauses were flowed down to you because you're a sub on a particular contract, right? And those clauses are 7012, 7019, and 7020. You've already agreed, if you will, that your organization does comply with NIST 800-171. If you've got the 7019 clause, you are required to do a self-assessment, and part of that self-assessment is a scoring algorithm which provides you a score of somewhere between a negative 237, I believe, and a positive 110, right? So there are 110 controls. If you've implemented them all, you're at 110. The reason it's a larger negative number is some of the controls are -5, some are -3, and some are -1, depending if you've implemented those or not. As part of that exercise, you should produce what's called an SSP, a system security plan. And if you haven't implemented a particular control, you should have a POAM, a plan of actions and milestones to address that shortcoming as part of your overall security system security plan. So a system security plan is basically on how you've implemented those different controls, your policies against those, what you're doing to implement that particular policy, the proof that you're implementing that policy, and any checks and balances you have against that particular policy. It's not just a checkbox of whether or not you've implemented or not. And if you need some help in writing those policies, in addressing any shortcomings you have, if you've got an open POAM against a particular policy today, that's really why, I hope you joined today to understand how Policy Pro can help you in addressing some of those open items you may have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David and let him talk about how you use Policy Pro to help you with that dilemma.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so as Kevin mentioned, today we'll be walking through a demo of the platform, Policy Pro. And Policy Pro was designed to help you regardless of where you are in your cybersecurity journey. So maybe you just now realized that you have some work to do in terms of getting compliant around CMMC, or like Kevin said, even if you aren't exactly worried about CMMC coming down the pipe anytime soon for you, you should still be working towards that NIST 800-171 compliance, closing out all of your open POAM items, and ensuring that you have the policies in place for your organization. So that's really what Policy Pro is designed for. And maybe you are a little bit further along and you have all of your policies, but you just want to make sure that you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, and that your policies meet all of the required items for CMMC 2.0. So we'll kind of, as we walk through the demo, I'll show you exactly how you can use it for whatever situation you might be in. So to get started, we'll start off using our policy building tool. And our policy building tool has been updated for CMMC 2.0. So here, as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got the 14 different policy family domains. For this particular demo, I'll be walking through a level 2 example, but we also have level 1 available as well. And here in the level 2, we've got the access control policy domain all the way down to system and information integrity. And so the policy building tool can help you as you are creating a policy document from scratch. So maybe you already, or maybe your organization doesn't have a written down access control policy, or maybe the policy you've written is severely outdated and you kind of want to start from scratch. Whatever the case may be, you can definitely use this tool to help assist you there. The first time through the platform, you'll receive this pop-up here, and it's a brief explanation of what policies are, as well as some of those other documentation requirements that Kevin mentioned earlier, including a POAM template and an SSP template. Exostar does have a suite of products that can help assist you in these areas. So if you don't already have an SSP or a POAM created and you wish to have a more automated approach, definitely check out the other suites of products as well. But for today's demo, we'll just kind of cover this particular application and how we can address your policies. So on this screen here, we see this prepare, gather, and consult page. And this is everything you'll need to prepare prior to even begin your writing on your access control policy. So, for example, it might include gathering any sort of documents or records for your organization related to the maintenance of your company's IT infrastructure. It could be related to any other sort of services or processes or procedures, including things for remote login sessions, etc. So again, having these kind of in place prior to working on the templates can ensure that you have all of the necessary information to build out your policy. And it'll make a little bit more sense as I walk through the actual template itself. Also, you should have a good sense of who the stakeholders involved will be when you are working on this particular policy. So for an access control policy, we might involve your organization's network administrator, the head of IT or CISO, and then any other outside contractors, if applicable. So if you are utilizing an MSP or an MSSP to help you manage your IT services, definitely they would be involved in this policy creation process as well. So the actual policy template is broken out into a couple different sections or categories. We've got the header here, which includes your organization name, what department this particular policy falls under. The issue date is for once you finalize this particular document, the approved by, and then the tracking number can be used however your organization wishes. However, most people use it to keep track of versions, so you can put the version number of the policy in that section there. And then the other sections include the purpose, the scope, and the individual practices. So if you recall back to the PowerPoint deck, CMMC 2.0 Level 2 has 110 different practices that you'll need to address within your particular policy. And we'll go through a couple examples here. So for the first practice, Access Control 3.1.1, it's about limiting information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users or devices. Underneath each of the practices, you'll see some guidelines here, and the guidelines will help you understand exactly what the particular practice is about, as well as help you craft the narrative as you're working on the actual template. To get to the actual meat of the policy templates, we'll click on the pencil icon here to the right, and that'll bring up this pop-up screen here. And so we can see that 3.1.1 will be addressing our organization's account creation policy, as well as our work from home and bring your own device policies. And as you're working through the platform and working through these templates, you'll do a couple things once you get to this actual screen here. The first thing is ensure that this is indeed what your organization is doing or what it plans on doing. You're going to want to come in here and customize it based on exactly what it is your organization is doing. In addition to that, there are going to be specific areas that you're going to want to pay particular attention to make sure that you're addressing exactly how your organization is doing it. So, for example, in the first paragraph here, we've got all account creations will be submitted by the requesting department manager to the IT support email address for completion using the blank account request ticketing system or other processes. So there in that parentheses or brackets, you're going to want to put exactly what system that is that you're utilizing to address this particular account creation process. The second piece to it is, or second example to it is here in the second bullet, where we've got the systems administrators and members of the IT support team shall respond and act accordingly to requests within a timely fashion, offering at least a blank hour turnaround for account creation. So here, again, fill in the blank there, depending on exactly how long you believe it takes your organization to actually create that account. So once we've kind of gone through that customization process and saved the necessary changes, we can click on the Save button to ensure that all the information has been saved into the template, and we can see the date gets captured as well as which user made the change. So if you do have multiple users using the application and working on a particular policy, you can see exactly who made changes to which particular practice. If you did make a mistake or you just want to go back to the original template, you can always click on the Reset button. The Reset button simply resets the individual practice and won't reset any of the other practices or policies that you may have already worked on. One other note before we move on is for those who have been Policy Pro users in the past, previous to the update to CMMC 2.0, is your data is still there, it's still available. You can see on the left-hand side the legacy NIST data and the legacy CMMC 1.0 data. So if you access that, you can transfer the information over into CMMC 2.0, or you can continue working in the legacy versions. That's what you prefer. Now, before we move on to the rest of the platform, we do want to export this document. And what this export is going to do is it's going to combine all of the sections that I mentioned before, the header, the purpose, the scope, and the individual practices associated with this policy. The screen here is just giving me a warning that I haven't actually gone into the other sections and customized, but assuming I have, I can click that yes, and it will then export it into a Word document to save on my local drive. And it'll also be an important step for the next part of the platform, which is the policy assessment piece. And the policy assessment piece allows your organization to assess any of the policies surrounding CMMC 2.0 or around NIST 800-171. And so what you'll do is you'll click on this upload button, you'll attach the documents in question. So here it's going to be this access control document. And I'm going to receive some information about how my documents did in terms of scoring and the other assessment metrics. It doesn't necessarily have to be a policy created using our policy builder. So as I kind of mentioned earlier on, if you are in a state where you already have existing policies, let's say you've already created an access control policy, you can still upload that as well and get that assessed as long as the format is in .docx or .doc or a PDF file. So as long as it's one of those three file formats, you can upload that file and get that policy assessed. So to view the assessment, you want to click here to see your detailed scorecard, and this will bring up this pop-up here. And so the overall assessment for this particular policy that I've uploaded appears relevant in size, scope, and organizational customization. What that means is the overall assessment is comprised of three different criteria. We've got the relevance, the model similarity, and the word count. The relevance is how many key terms or phrases are in your policy documents in relation to the rest of your policies that you've uploaded. The model similarity is comparing your document to our template document and our best practice document, and we do that for two reasons. One, to ensure that, again, it's been appropriately customized and that it fits your organizational needs and what it is your organization is actually doing. But in addition to that, also making sure that's covering everything it needs to cover. And then finally, the word count, which doesn't strictly have an impact on the assessment, but if your document is too short, chances are the rest of the assessment might not be accurate. So if you do notice that the word count shows that it's too low, for this particular document, then you want to take the overall assessment as well as the overall score with a little bit of grain of salt. And in terms of the actual overall score itself, here we see a 70.5%. And while that might seem like a low score to people seeing it for the first time, it shouldn't be treated as an academic score, meaning 90% as an A, 80% as a B. What it is a threshold-based overall score, meaning anything above 50% is a relevant document. And I'll cover how you can actually use the overall score once I show you a little bit more about how to use this information to improve your policy documents. And the way you can do that is through our KENI system. So KENI stands for Key Elements Not Included, and we break that out into our control KENIs and our general KENIs. The control KENIs here, for example, CUI, non-public information, this is going to be that key term or phrase that's missing in my policy document. I should be looking to include all of the control KENIs as well as all of the general KENIs into my document. Underneath the key term here, we also give you exactly what control it's tied back into. So for CUI and non-public information, it's tied to access control 3.1.22, controlling information posted or processed on publicly accessible information systems. Underneath that, so you don't have to kind of flip back and forth between the platform and the standard, we give you the language directly from the standard. So here is that 3.1.22 security requirement. The discussion, again, is directly from CMMC 2.0. And then the documents for examination are going to be any other sort of document or record or procedure that your organization might already have that can help you address that particular control KENI. So it might include things like a security plan or a list of users authorized to post publicly accessible content, and then any other sort of awareness training records or documents or records that can help you assist, that can help you as you're rewriting your policies. Another example of a control KENI here is going to be FIPS, and we can see that it's tied to access control 3.1.13, employing cryptographic mechanisms to protect the confidentiality of remote access sessions, as well as access control 3.1.17, protecting wireless access using authentication and encryption. So here in this particular key term or phrase, you're going to want to address it in both those controls or practices. So whenever you see it tied to multiple practices like this, you want to ensure that you're covering it in both or however many practices that KENI is addressed in. Now, the general policy KENI terms are very similar in the sense that they're also key terms or phrases that my policy should look to include. However, it's not going to have this collapse all, expand all button with that information about the controls. And the reason for that is it's not tied specifically to a particular practice or control within CMMC. So where do these key terms come from? They come from our analysis of thousands of different policy documents, as well as experts in the field, whether they're auditors or consultants in the field. So they recommend that based on best practices for your policies, you should look to include these general policy KENI terms to ensure that it's covering everything it needs to cover. Now, if you do want to work on any of this information offline, you can export it into a PDF as well. And then one final kind of feature within policy assessment is this management approval button. And once I click it, I will show you exactly how you can use it here in our dashboard. So the dashboard is going to be all of the work you've kind of done throughout your journey in our platform. So it'll show you all of the policies you've created in Policy Builder. It'll show you what you've uploaded, as well as all of the scoring metrics I mentioned earlier. Also, the management approval button, let me just scroll down here, Here in the green is my latest management approved button or approved policy documents, and we can see exactly when and who approved that particular document. And that's going to be an important aspect to not just to keep track of the proper version and ensure that everyone's working on the same policy, but it's also a requirement of CMMC that senior management is actively involved in the policy process, that they understand what the material is in the policies, and that they've approved those policies as well. So you really need that senior management buy-in when you are working on these policies. So it's a good way to show that process and keep track of that process as well. Next to that, we can also see which standard it was uploaded into. So for this particular example, I've uploaded into CMMC 2.0 level 2. Again, if I'm working for level 1, I can switch over to level 1 by clicking on this button here on the left-hand side to switch to a different level, which is going to just have those, I believe, 6 different policies and 17 practices. And then I can see here in audit and accountability, I haven't done any work in there. However, in awareness and training, I have completed my policies in Policy Builder, and I just need to work on the policy assessment piece to make sure that I've uploaded it and addressed any control or general counting that might be that might have shown in the platform. Now, as I'm working through the policy building part, or maybe the policy assessment part, maybe I come to parts that I'm unsure of how to address within my particular policy. I can come here and resources across the web to help you address any particular part that you might be having troubles with. So just continuing on with the access control example, maybe one of my control counties was related to firewalls, and I'm unsure how to adjust that in my policy. I can click on the guidelines on firewalls and firewall policies and be able to exactly see how I can address that within my policies. So that's the platform. Again, you should be working on your policies as soon as possible. It is a pretty time-intensive process, so you want to make sure that you're working on it right now to not just be compliant around CMMC 2.0 when the time comes, but also to ensure that you're working towards that NIST 800-171, closing out any existing POAM items that you might have. If you do have further questions, we do have chat in our platform as well, so you can talk with us at any time, or we do have a Policy Pro specific workshop every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern that you can attend. With that, thank you, Kevin, for having me, and appreciate everyone for joining today's workshop. Back to you, Kevin.
Thanks so much, David. So let me share my screen here, everybody. Yeah. There we go. So as David mentioned during his presentation, Policy Pro is part of an overall CMMC Ready suite that Exostar offers. It consists of these 4 different components that you see here, of which Policy Pro is one. If in your journey you find that you're ready to do a self-assessment and you want some help in both managing that self-assessment as well as ongoing management of your overall NIST 800-171 or CMMC readiness, there's a solution we have called Certification Assistant. Certification Assistant really works hand in hand with Policy Pro. So as you go through an assessment, Certification Assistant will walk you through each of those controls. You would take those policies you wrote in Policy Pro, move them over to Certification Assistant, and that's a simple upload within it. And then you would add in those additional procedures that you use, right? You got a policy, then you've got the procedures that you use to implement that policy. You've got the the proof that those policies have been implemented. So for example, like David's example where you're showing different accounts and their levels and things like that, you should be able to show that you've got those kinds of accounts within your either as a role-based access control or a role within your your Active Directory or some other corporate directory structure for those kinds of users, and these users have been assigned to them. So all of those things become part of your assessment, if you will. And then the output of Certification Assistant is that SSP, any open POAMs you have because you haven't addressed a policy yet. So if you've got those two things going, and you also feel like one of your shortcomings is to store and secure that controlled unclassified information you receive or create. Exostar has our managed Microsoft 365 application. This solution provides an Exostar managed tenant up in GCC High to store that controlled unclassified information, work on that information, share it amongst your team members or external parties. All of those, all in an environment that meets 85 of those 110 controls with a shared responsibility matrix, so you better understand what Exostar covers and what you would need to cover outside of that particular tenant. If you need some assistance from an organization to help you throughout this journey, we also have a number of different partners who do either basic assessments or readiness assessments of how you're doing today, where you need some work, and they can also offer additional ongoing management services and other services to help you maintain your corporation or organization's compliance needs. Now, before we get to the Q&A, just wanted to remind everybody there is an exit poll. It's in that YouTube description as well. Love to get your feedback on how we did today. Also, to get an idea of what kinds of topics you'd like to address in the future. This is one of 4 webinars we put on throughout the month. And then we also put on a number of product workshops on as well. So so now we're going to address the Q&A. So as I mentioned before, these were the questions that were submitted prior to the webinar when you signed up. So we received 3 questions. Sorry about that. Jumped ahead there. So these are the 3 questions that we got submitted. So if you are a COTS supplier, what level of CMMC do you need? So for those who don't know, COTS stands for commercial off the shelf, right? So that's packaged software, hardware, etc. So for COTS, you typically need to be a CMMC level 1. You don't expect to have any controlled unclassified information, but you may very well have contract information. Now, I am not, an assessment organization, nor am I your legal counsel. So you should always look at your contracts. You should always ensure that you know what CMMC level you need to satisfy your particular question. Another question we got in: do we know yet by when CMMC certification will become mandatory? So that was kind of that question I got during, or I answered hopefully at the beginning here. We don't yet know when it's going to become mandatory. We'll know it's mandatory when the DFARS clauses are updated to include the CMMC language as part of those DFARS clauses. It appears right now. It depends on how those rules are assessed when they're put out, whether or not it's an interim final rule or it's assessed as a I can't remember the term. My apologies. I'll just switch back and get it for you. It's going to depend on this here, on whether or not it's an interim final rule or a notice of proposed rulemaking. If it's an interim final rule, that starts the count for a 60-day public comment period before the final rule is issued. If it's a notice of proposed rulemaking, that extends that period, and then the next step would be that interim final rule. Alrighty. So we get this question quite a bit around the clarity over controlled unclassified information. So this is the detail. If asked by a customer or potential customer to come up with a design, they provide us some specifications for their requirements. Are we supposed to ask them if this falls under the DFARS 7012 clause? So it's always a good idea to ask. Now, by definition, controlled unclassified information should be marked by the organization that originated that information. But we all know we don't live in a perfect world. Sometimes mistakes are made. So if you're unsure, it's always good to ask that question. And so you do know for sure. And Exostar has a number of relationships with some of the large primes out there, and they are happy when their supply chain asks those questions. It lets them know that you're doing your due diligence as well, and they'll ask those questions up the chain as well to get those answers for you. So it's always a good idea to ask. I would always encourage you to ask those questions up front. So the last part of this question, this means that we may have distributed CUI documents without knowing. You're right, you may have, but if you find out at a later date that those were controlled unclassified, it would behoove you to go back and mark them as such, and then ensure that they then are stored and processed in the correct location. So I believe we did get another question that came over. Let me look at my chat here. Yeah. Let's see. How are controlled unclassified information going to be marked? What tells us we must be CMMC certified? So what tells you if you need to be CMM certified is the contracts that you sign. If the contracts that you sign, say, have those DFARS clauses that reference CMMC, then it'll tell you what level of CMMC you need to be certified at if you want to be a part of that contract. Now, as I mentioned before in the last question, if you receive information from a prime contractor or somebody else in that supply chain, the information that is controlled unclassified information should be marked as such. If there's any questions about it, you should ask those questions and ask them if it is, or if as part of this contract they expect there to be. Because again, that'll inform you on what CMMC level you need to be. But if as part of contract fulfillment you agree to those flow down clauses, and you then receive CUI information as part of that contract, it's expected that you would treat it as such and that you would be compliant with the CMMC level that you signed up for as part of that contract. So those are the questions we received today. I want to thank everybody for their time. We do have some upcoming events. As I mentioned before, Exostar hosts a number of webinars each month. We also do provide workshops on each of our individual solutions. As David told you, he hosts one of these every Tuesday to answer those users of Policy Pro's questions as they come in. We also offer a free trial on both Policy Pro and our Certification Assistant. Those free trials can be kicked off from our website. We also offer a workshop on our Managed Microsoft 365 application. That's every Thursday at 2 o'clock. Feel free to go to our website and sign up for that as well. And then obviously, if you just need some additional information, you've got these links here to provide you that additional information you might need just on CMMC itself, current organizations, how to get trained on it through the cyberab.org, etc. So again, before you leave, please fill out our exit poll. Love to get your feedback. And I want to thank everybody for your time and attention today. Have a great rest of the week, and we hope to see you or talk to you soon. Have a great day.